One of the most effective modes of training is on-the-job training, or OJT. Two of the most important phases of virtually all OJT programs are implementation and evaluation. Implementation involves carrying out the training program as it was planned, and evaluation involves determining whether the goals of the training program have been met. On-the-job training is an effective way to teach a trainee how to do a job. However, for this type of training to work well, the instructor must be capable and qualified. In this part of the program, we'll examine the qualities and characteristics of a good OJT instructor. Probably the most important characteristics are knowledge of the job and the ability to communicate that knowledge well. When instructing a trainee, you'll need to explain technical and sometimes complex information in simple, understandable terms. Before conducting OJT, instructors commonly go through some form of training on how to teach effectively. In addition, an OJT instructor may sometimes need to improve or upgrade job skills that will be taught to others. Besides the ability to communicate well, a number of other factors may also contribute to being a good OJT instructor. One factor is the employee's experience in the plant. An experienced worker will likely be very familiar with plant operations and will have acquired a great deal of knowledge that can be passed on to trainees. Also, by working in the plant over a period of time, the veteran usually has the respect of co-workers and is generally viewed positively in a position of authority. How an instructor handles this position of authority is another important factor. A good instructor must be able to display good leadership qualities. Good leadership qualities are particularly important if the instructor has to train someone of roughly the same job experience, age, or background. This type of situation can become awkward and counterproductive if the instructor is not an effective leader. An effective OJT instructor is one who can help a trainee learn without taking advantage of the position of authority. Another factor is the instructor's overall attitude. If you don't have a positive attitude, you may set a bad example for the trainee, and if so, you won't be an effective teacher. When instructing trainees, an OJT instructor should be objective and attempt to teach all trainees equally. You should make a conscious effort not to play favorites. During OJT, the trainee will have to get accustomed to having someone looking over his shoulder and watching his every move. One of your goals as an OJT instructor is to create a comfortable environment in which the trainee can learn. You don't want the trainee feeling intimidated. He must feel at ease so that he'll ask questions when he doesn't understand something. One way to put a trainee at ease is to discuss your own experiences when you were training to be an operator. Admitting that you may not have done everything flawlessly right off the bat will reassure the trainee that mistakes are part of the learning process. So encourage him to ask questions on anything that he's unsure about. And if one of his questions stumps you, don't be ashamed to admit it. Just let him know you'll check into it and get back to him. As an OJT instructor, you may be teaching trainees who have virtually no background knowledge, so don't take anything for granted. Depending on their abilities, different trainees will progress at different rates. But as an instructor, you must remain patient, even when a trainee may not be grasping an aspect of a job that seems simple to you. Before OJT is implemented, certain plans and preparations have to be made to help ensure the success of the training program. Scheduling is an important concern when planning on-the-job training, since OJT must be scheduled around the operations of the unit. The training department must coordinate its plans with the unit or line supervisor. Both must be aware of when the on-the-job training occurs and who is involved. As an OJT instructor, you should also have a plan or strategy for scheduling. If you have any flexibility in scheduling the OJT, you should coordinate when to cover each task with when the tasks are scheduled to be performed in the plant. The time that the training will occur is another important factor. For example, if any of the training must be conducted outside, then it may be better to schedule the training during the daylight hours than at night. However, if the trainee will be required to perform the actual job at night, then it might be preferable to train him under similar conditions. It may also be better to schedule certain tasks early in the shift so that both the instructor and the trainee will be more alert. When scheduling training, another factor to consider is the trainee to instructor ratio. Often, on-the-job training is conducted on a one-on-one basis. However, depending on the circumstances, there may be more than one trainee for each instructor. Keep in mind, though, that the more trainees there are, the less time each will have to perform the job procedures. The more trainees there are, the more likely it is for certain trainees to simply watch someone else instead of doing the steps themselves. So, when planning OJT, make sure that you schedule enough time for each trainee to practice all of the job skills. Before implementing OJT, you should review the responsibilities and procedures involved in the job that you'll be teaching. If you're unsure about any aspects of the job, clear them up before the training begins. Another preparation is to collect and organize any materials that are needed. This includes any tools and safety gear that are required for the job. Depending on the job, you may want to demonstrate and explain how the tools or safety gear work before heading out into the plant. Other training materials include performance objectives and OJT checklists. As you may know, a performance objective is a brief description of the outcome or intended result of training. An OJT checklist identifies the steps the trainee must follow to accomplish the performance objective. In this part of the program, we'll look at different methods of conducting an OJT program and identify coaching skills that an instructor can use during OJT. First of all, the instructor and the trainee should review the overall goals of the job. That is, you should explain the purpose of the job and identify the performance objectives. General procedures should be discussed before and during OJT. You should explain why certain steps are required and how they affect the overall job. There may also be special safety or emergency procedures to consider. If so, it's a good idea to go over these with the trainee early on. If you're teaching the equipment in a process unit, it may be a good idea to walk the trainee through the flow path of the process. By doing this, the trainee will become acquainted with the different components in the system and get a basic idea of how they fit together. In addition, you may want to have the trainee get actively involved in the learning. For example, you can have him find the process components on a flow diagram. If the trainee has had any past experience that's similar to the new job, you can make the training easier by comparing the new procedures to the trainee's previous experience. A number of different methods can be used to conduct on-the-job training. The way in which OJT is performed depends on the nature of the job, the preference of the instructor, and the ability of the trainee. For instance, you might first demonstrate the procedures involved, then allow the trainee to perform the tasks himself, correcting his mistakes and assisting him when needed. On the other hand, for fairly simple tasks, you may decide that demonstrating each task is unnecessary. You may simply explain how to do each step and then have the trainee perform the job himself under your supervision. One technique you can use to teach a long, complex job is to break the job down into smaller, separate tasks. In this way, the trainee will only need to focus on learning one set of job tasks at a time. He won't feel as overwhelmed as he would if he had to learn the whole job at once. Regardless of the training method used, an OJT instructor is like a coach, so you should apply good coaching skills. In general, you will want to instill confidence in the trainee. Encourage him to perform different job tasks and accept new responsibilities. Instead of commenting only when the trainee does something wrong, the instructor should also recognize when things are done correctly. As an instructor, keep in mind that you don't want to overcoach or undercoach. If you overcoach a trainee, he may become too dependent on you. Once he's completed training and is working on the job, he won't be able to rely on your guidance anymore. On the other hand, you don't want to undercoach the trainee either. If you don't give him sufficient guidance, it will take him longer to develop the skills he needs. and the more time it takes for the training to be completed, the more costly it is for your plant. For just about any trainee, it's a good idea to review the main points and procedures so that the trainee will be less likely to forget them. Once the trainee begins performing the tasks of the job himself, you should monitor his progress using any relevant OJT checklists, schedules, or charts. As the trainee performs each step, check off that item on the list and record the date that it was completed. You'll be able to use the list to show the trainee how his progress is measured, and you'll know when the training is completed. As an OJT instructor, you can help instill in the trainee a good attitude and good work habits. For example, at the end of a job, it's important to leave the work area clean. All tools and gear that were used for the job should be put away in their proper places. When an operator completes a job, there may be some paperwork to do. You'll need to show your trainee how to fill out this paperwork when necessary. The trainee should understand that duties like housekeeping and paperwork are important parts of an operator's job. They're not simply extra chores to do when and if there's time. By observing how you follow the plant's policies and procedures, the trainee will learn the proper way to conduct himself on the job. In this topic, we covered some of the key principles and procedures related to the implementation of an OJT program. We looked at qualities of a good OJT instructor. We went over some important OJT preparations, and we saw several effective methods of conducting OJT. At this point, check what you've learned by trying a few questions on this material. Probably the most important characteristics are knowledge of the job and the ability to communicate that knowledge well. When instructing a trainee, you'll need to explain technical and sometimes complex information in simple, understandable terms. The time that the training will occur is another important factor. For example, if any of the training must be conducted outside, then it may be better to schedule the training during the daylight hours than at night. However, if the trainee will be required to perform the actual job at night, then it might be preferable to train him under similar conditions. One technique you can use to teach a long, complex job is to break the job down into smaller, separate tasks. In this way, the trainee will only need to focus on learning one set of job tasks at a time. He won't feel as overwhelmed as he would if he had to learn the whole job at once. During the entire OJT process, the instructor continually evaluates the trainee's performance to monitor his progress and to determine when the trainee has learned how to do the job correctly. One of the most important tools used for trainee evaluation is an OJT checklist. The checklist consists of a list of tasks that must be accomplished to complete a particular job. Each task is checked off as it's completed. As the training progresses, make sure to give the trainee enough practice time. Both you and the trainee should be confident that he can do the job correctly. Also, make sure that his progress and achievements are well documented on the OJT checklist. When you sign off on the checklist, you are verifying that the trainee can do the job. Once the trainee understands and has accomplished all the items on the checklist, he should be able to perform the job on his own. To confirm this, you may want to spot check or review certain items on the checklist again, perhaps the most important ones. Clear records should be kept to keep track of what happened during training. There may also be government regulations requiring the documentation of training. The records are often in the form of a progression chart or training schedule, which indicates what tasks the trainee needs to complete and when. If the trainee is not progressing acceptably, some of the training may need to be repeated, or additional training may be necessary until the trainee is up to speed. If additional training is needed, the unit supervisor or training manager may need to be consulted. Also, if you find that the training is not going well, act professionally and focus on the job at hand to try to figure out a way to get better results. Who knows, by the end of OJT, a problem trainee may turn out to be a very good operator. When the trainee has mastered all of the skills necessary to do the job, his training may not yet be over. Depending on your plant's approach, a formal testing or evaluation of the trainee's ability may have to be conducted. Plants often have their own qualification or certification programs to evaluate their operators. The person administering the formal evaluation may or may not be the OJT instructor. Even if the formal evaluation is conducted by a third party, the OJT instructor can help prepare the trainee. For example, the instructor can explain the types of things he'll need to know and the way in which the evaluation will be conducted. There's more to OJT evaluation than just evaluating the trainee. It's also important to evaluate the training program and the performance of the OJT instructor. This is basically an objective self-evaluation that can be helpful to you when you're planning how to instruct future trainees. A good OJT instructor is flexible enough to adjust training techniques to improve the trainee's performances and the productivity of the overall training program. If you're considering making a change in your training methods, you may want to discuss alternatives with your plant's training department or other OJT instructors. Another good source of information is someone you've recently trained. He will be able to tell you what was most helpful about the training and what could have been improved. You can also get feedback from your trainee's supervisor after the trainee's been on the job a while. The supervisor can let you know if the trainee was well trained, and he may offer suggestions on improvements. With these ideas, you can plan better for instructing new trainees in the future. What we're going to do in this part of the program is review the main steps and principles of on-the-job training. We'll do this by going through an OJT example from beginning to end. This example involves a sampling procedure. The first thing to do is determine the training needs for the sampling job. This requires a job and task analysis. A job and task analysis identifies and describes the knowledge and skills a worker needs to perform a job. The trainee is profiled as well to determine what aspects of the sampling procedure he needs to be trained on. The next step is to decide which training needs can be met through OJT. The knowledge-based items, such as the reasons and statistical concepts related to sampling, may need to be discussed in a classroom. The skills-based items, such as the specific sampling procedures, are best taught through OJT. From the task analysis, training materials can be developed. These include performance objectives and OJT checklists. In this example, one performance objective, or intended result of the job, is the taking of representative and uncontaminated liquid samples. And these are some of the checklist steps that have to be done to meet the performance objective. Training is implemented even before a sample is taken. The instructor goes over some of the basics, such as what the sample is, how it's going to be used by the plant, and how abnormal samples affect the process. The proper sampling equipment, including chemical gloves, sample bottles, labels, tongs, and any other safety gear, is also assembled and explained before taking samples. Then the instructor goes through the steps on the checklist. The instructor also emphasizes why the job's done a certain way. For example, she points out that to get a good sample, you need to let the liquid run a few seconds first. The instructor also stresses that it doesn't take much to contaminate a sample, so details like rinsing the bottle thoroughly and putting the cap on right away are important. Then the trainee's given a chance to take a sample. The instructor documents and evaluates his performance by checking off the items on the checklist and determines whether the performance objectives are met. The trainee may also be given a written test on sampling as part of his evaluation. Finally, the OJT program itself, including the instructor, is evaluated to determine the effectiveness of the program. In this topic, we looked at the last major step in a typical OJT program, evaluation. We saw how to evaluate the trainee, the instructor, and the OJT program as a whole. Then we tied everything together by reviewing the entire OJT process. Take some time now to answer the practice questions for this topic. During the entire OJT process, the instructor continually evaluates the trainee's performance to monitor his progress and to determine when the trainee has learned how to do the job correctly. One of the most important tools used for trainee evaluation is an OJT checklist. The checklist consists of a list of tasks that must be accomplished to complete a particular job. Each task is checked off as it's completed. There's more to OJT evaluation than just evaluating the trainee. It's also important to evaluate the training program and the performance of the OJT instructor. This is basically an objective self-evaluation that can be helpful to you when you're planning how to instruct future trainees. A good OJT instructor is flexible enough to adjust training techniques to improve the trainee's performances and the productivity of the overall training program. The first thing to do is determine the training needs for the sampling job. This requires a job and task analysis. A job and task analysis identifies and describes the knowledge and skills a worker needs to perform a job.